Hello, everybody. So, yeah, this is going to be an interesting conversation. It's one of those conversations that don't happen a lot of the time, but when it happens, it's usually impactful and it's usually interesting. So, a few months ago, we saw the news that the Nigerian federal government launched a fund called iDICE, Investment in Digital Creatives, and yeah, that was quite. It had a lot of reactions, but the most important thing is people were asking very, 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 very important questions about this fund. So it's a $618 million fund that's supported by the likes of AFDB, Bank of Industry, and of course a huge investment from the private sector. So it was quite an interesting initiative, especially at a very, 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 very interesting time in our conversation. So we decided to maybe look for a little bit of trouble. I think one of our reporters, Oluwanifemi Kolawole, tweeted at the vice president, like, "Hey, Professor Yemi Osibanjo, people are asking what is going on with the iDICE fund." And even in the YouTube comments, Instagram comments, you guys were also asking, how do we even get this iDICE fund? So that's what we wanted to come and figure out today, right? So we decided to invite someone from the office of the vice president by the name of Ife Adebayo. Hi, Ife. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Emmanuel. It's my pleasure.
This is the special assistant to the vice president on innovation. So everything that relates to technology and innovation, he's the guy that is your go-to person, right? So, and the office of the vice president has been very, very active in the tech space. There's been the visits to the Silicon Valley a few years ago, and there's been a number of initiatives that we're also going to be talking about in this conversation today. So yeah, Ife, thank you so much once again. And I think the first thing we're going to be asking is, what is the iDICE fund and why is it important for startup founders and entrepreneurs today?
Thanks. So it is actually the iDICE program, not the fund. So it's called the Investment in Digital and Creative Enterprises program. So it's a full program that looks at interventions in Nigeria's technology and creative space. And the history is that in 2018, like you had mentioned, His Excellency made a trip to Silicon Valley and Hollywood, His Excellency the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osibanjo. And one of the feedback we got from investors at the time was that government needed to have a skin in the game and support this ecosystem, as government is seeking for investors and partnerships and collaboration in the space. And this was the same story both at Silicon Valley with the tech investors and at Hollywood with the investors in the creative space. So as part of those engagements, when we had returned, we had engaged with the African Development Bank to say, what can we do? And at the time, the African Development Bank was putting together $100 million fund, this time not a program, for Rwanda and similar for Cote d'Ivoire. So we had engaged with them. And in the process, we had done a pre-feasibility study and a feasibility study process just to understand how such a fund will work in Nigeria. And we came to the conclusion that just having a fund that deals with one aspect of the challenges that the ecosystem is facing, which is the challenge of access to finance, will not solve the problem. Now we needed to have a full program that looked at the various components and various challenges that the ecosystem faces, which the first is on talent. How do we provide relevant skills, both basic, intermediate, and advanced, for persons within the digital and creative sector? The second is access to finance. How do we provide funding to pre-seed, seed stage, and early growth stage startups within the tech and creative sector? And in the finance bucket, we're going to have equity and debt options, so that there is some flexibility based on the various needs of the various startups. While the third and the final one is on policy. How do we support the policy environment to ensure that the startups within the tech and creative space are able to thrive and that we don't have government policies that consistently go against them? So, for example, you have the Nigeria Startup Act, which was signed by Mr. President in October. Where we'll be working to see how that can be operationalized, how we can domesticate that within the states, and how we can just generally ensure that policy, regulation, and legislation for this ecosystem gets the right support.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So we should be thinking about this as a holistic program that supports not just with funds, but with skills and network
Exactly.
and everything, and policies too. So, yeah, so how does the iDICE program work right now? So, if I'm a startup founder, or I'm just a creative, how do I interact with the iDICE program?
But maybe the first thing I need to speak about is where we are with the program. So this program is being supported by three international development finance institutions, which are the African Development Bank, which is providing a facility to Nigeria of $170 million. The French Development Agency providing $116 million, and the Islamic Development Bank providing $70 million. And then as a federal government counterpart contribution, the Bank of Industry is putting in $45 million to support the program. So in total, what we have in the bucket of funds available to the program is about $400 million thereabout. But like you had mentioned, this is a $618 million program. So the private sector is expected to sort of come in and fill in the blanks, so to say, with the additional about $217 million to drive the program over a period of 3 to 5 years. So where we are right now at the program is that we have all necessary approvals with the African Development Bank, and that's why we had the launch of the program with the president of the African Development Bank in attendance. So we're in the final phases of approvals for the French Development Agency and the Islamic Development Bank. So the Bank of Industry has set up a lean program coordination unit within the bank that is sort of managing and running this program. At the moment, we have expressions of interests out for fund managers who will manage the equity fund part of the program. And over time, various expressions of interest will continue to evolve, where we're going to be looking for enterprise support organizations, we're going to be looking for innovation hubs, we're going to be looking for business development service providers who will then be able to work with startups on the program, provide opportunities to them, provide funding for them, and run hackathons and run activities that can support them. But one critical thing to mention is that there's none of these activities. We're trying as much as possible. We've designed this program in a way that it is not a government program. It is an ecosystem program. So what you're going to find is that over the lifetime of the program will be working with ecosystem players who will drive the activities of the program. We have government agencies like NITDA who are doing an amazing job. We have the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy doing an amazing job, who are running actual government programs. So we're trying to complement the efforts and the activities that have been done, the great work being done by the DG of NITDA and the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy. So what we're doing is complementary to what they are doing, but engaging with the core ecosystem and letting the ecosystem drive these initiatives.
To talk about the iDICE program being ecosystem-led, sounds a little bit like how the Startup Act came into being. It was very much ecosystem-led from what I learned, and the government just provided support on the background. So is that something, is that a similar scenario we might see play out in this instance?
Yes, very similar scenario. So like you saw with the Startup Act, where we had the ecosystem driving conversations, but then where we also had the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy taking leadership. You had the DG of NITDA also taking leadership in the way it was put together, and also how all that that collaborative spirit helped to push things much quicker than a typical legislation will go through government. That's sort of what we're looking to do also. We have the Ministry of Communications already doing a lot of work, engaging the ecosystem. We have NITDA led by the DG doing a lot of work. So what iDICE is going to do is complement those efforts and try to help us to pull in the ecosystem in a closer way and let the ecosystem take the lead. And just to add that, when I mean the ecosystem also, because there's this tendency to rely a lot on the Lagos ecosystem. One of the key things that the iDICE program is looking to do is to focus on the national spread. And what we're going to be doing is in places like Lagos, where there is already a lot of activity, we're going to be working with those who are already active within the space. In other places where activity is still very nascent, we'll be looking to catalyze activity in those places, such that at the end of the program, we'll have been able to catalyze venture capital investments, build talent, provide opportunities in the less typical areas.
Interesting. So, what would that look like in those nascent places? Because you rightly pointed out that the focus for most of those startup operations is in Lagos, and understandably so, because that's where most of the big companies are. That's where it's easily one of the most populous states in Nigeria. So, well, how would this process look like to achieve this national spread?
So what you find also is that even in the places where the culture of innovation and startup culture is nascent, what you find is that there is actually activity going on. For example, I remember on a visit to Borno, I saw young guys who were building drones. I saw guys who were building IoT walking sticks and all. So it's about finding those guys who are doing some work, who have some activities ongoing, but do not have the right level of support, and supporting them to be able to do more. It's also about providing the right linkages, finding the young guys who are active, young guys and ladies who are active within these nascent places, and sort of coordinating with them and linking them with opportunities in places like Lagos, Abuja, Kaduna, Edo, where there is already a lot of activity ongoing.
That's really cool. So, I think you maybe kind of addressed a concern that I had going into this conversation about the longevity or I will call it longevity, because most of the time you see that when one government comes and it leaves, when another government enters, there's very rarely continuity with the projects or the great initiatives that were started by the previous administration. And it happens like in different dimensions. Some projects are carried forward, but some projects are not. You said maybe the idea was birthed around 2018 during the tour of Silicon Valley and Hollywood. So the question is, why now, when this administration is just really close to the door?
Why now is that we have processes, bureaucratic processes that have to be followed when you're trying to engage in this kind of activity within the government space. So the African Development Bank, for example, before it is able to provide funding to support this kind of project, has to run processes like a pre-feasibility study, a feasibility study, then a program design. And I think the biggest issue that we really had was that we lost about 2 years to COVID, where the African Development Bank and other DFIs sort of prioritized their finances on providing country support, direct country support, to deal with the impact of COVID on the economy. So we lost about 2 years to that, and that's why we're starting now. But I think it's also critical to mention that government is a continuum. So we expect that this program will continue to have strong political leadership in the incoming government. But beyond that, the program is also one that is going to be has been insulated from political interference as much as possible. That's why it's placed within the Bank of Industry, run by a very lean team that is able to direct its activities and operations, and also because the core funding for the program is not coming from the federal government budget, but from these development finance institutions and from the Bank of Industry, which has its own access to its own funding and its own monies that it can repurpose for this program.
That's quite interesting. I think in my conversation with Oswald, the special assistant to the president on digital transformation, he also talked about engaging the government that does not move. So while most parts of the executives will be leaving, there are people in these agencies, in these ministries, that would still be there, and it might be useful to also engage with these kind of people so that there's this kind of continuity. So how are you thinking about that, and how do you think, say, ecosystem people who are usually probably timid to approach the government, how do you think they can approach this?
So the program has two levels of oversight. The first level is the vice president with ministers from 5 ministries: the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy, Ministry of Information and Culture, Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, and critically the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. So this political oversight remains irrespective of who is in those offices, right? But there is a second layer of oversight, which is the technical committee. Now, the technical committee is made up of representatives from each of these 5 ministries that I've mentioned, but it's also made up of representatives from the ecosystem. So we have representatives from the digital ecosystem and representatives from the creative ecosystem that form the technical committee that provide oversight to this program. So what that does is it helps to ensure that there is consistent collaboration, consistent conversations that are being had, and there's consistent connection between what the program is doing and what the ecosystem requires.
That's really cool. So now that there's this program, it's kind of like a public-private partnerships, and you have really big names like the African Development Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, and the French Development Bank. What would be their specific roles in this?
So this is a Nigerian program. They are providing financing facilities for it to Nigeria, and their role will be mostly of oversight and just ensuring that every penny released is used for what it has been stated for. So in the course of the program, funding will be released in tranches. As the program implementation goes on, they will review what you've done and determine whether they should release the next tranche. What will also happen is they will receive annual audits. They also have a monitoring and evaluation framework, which is designed as part of the program appraisal document, which we'll be using to submit reports to them, monitoring the impact of the program, monitoring if we're hitting the expected outputs and outcomes that the program has been designed to achieve.
Cool. That's really cool. So what should startups be expecting? What problems do you think the iDICE program will help them solve? And yeah, what should they be expecting?
Three key problems that I think the iDICE program will help startups to solve. The first is in the policy space. I think the iDICE program, you'll find the program being very active within the policy space. The DG of NITSDA, for example, has done a lot of work trying to ensure that we have the right policies and programs for startups in the country. We'll be engaging further with the work that they're doing and trying to see how we can critically domesticate a lot of these activities locally within the states. They should also expect a lot of support with respect to talent. So we'll be doing a lot of training, both for young Nigerians who are willing to develop skills in the tech and creative space, but also very critically, we'll be doing a lot of capacity building for enterprise support organizations. So all the innovation hubs, tech hubs, enterprise support organizations within universities and externally, and we'll be providing a lot of support for them. I also think another critical point is catalytic infrastructure. We'll be looking and engaging with these innovation hubs and technology hubs to say, what do you really need to keep the lights on? How can we support you with broadband access? How can we support you with solar power and things that just ensure that you're able to serve your community better and provide more support to startups? Another area we're looking at is to expand the work that the LSCTF, the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, has done with respect to workspace vouchers. How do we sort of build a national program on that? That will be able to support startups to be able to make use of these spaces. So in one way, providing some form of funding support for these ESOs, and in another way, providing an opportunity for startups to take advantage of those opportunities. The final and most critical, I think, that the startups would really like to hear about is access to finance. So there'll be two buckets of funds. There will be about over $100 million available in equity financing. These monies will be managed via three different pots of equity funding. So there'll be a tech-focused fund, which will be managed by tech sector fund manager. There'll be a creative sector fund, which will be managed by creative sector fund manager. Then very critically, there'll be a fund of funds. Now, what the fund of funds will do is that it will invest in smaller funds. So the fund of funds will exist to catalyze venture capital investments in the places where you don't typically have those sorts of investment. And we'll be looking for smaller funds who are investing in startups and supporting them to be able to invest more. But aside of the equity bucket, we're also going to have the debt bucket. There will be about $65 million, which will be available from the Islamic Development Bank's supply of funds as Islamic finance for startups. And when you say Islamic finance, it doesn't mean you have to be a Muslim. It's just a style of financing that means that you don't need to bring a collateral, and they also do not charge interest. So there will be Islamic finance, $65 million available for startups, and there will be a $45 million Bank of Industry plus a debt product that will also be available for startups to take advantage of. Thank you.
Cool. That's really interesting. So I guess the question now is, what kind of startups are you looking for, or what kind of creatives, if I may also venture into that what kind of people are you looking to fund with this initiative, or what kind of startups are you looking to help with the entire iDICE program?
We'll be looking to work with startups that are highly scalable, that have a high potential for growth, and that have a high potential for impact across various sectors, but must be tech or creative. So if you're in health, for example, must be health tech. If you're in agri, must be agri tech. And then across the creative space, we'll be working with people in the movie industry, we'll be working with visual arts, working with graphic artists, working with historians. We'll be across a broad spectrum, and we'll be engaging with people within the creative sector. Um, and the focus also for us is to support those who are within the pre-seed, seed, and early stage, early growth stage, right? Because what we found is that this is where the real support is needed. You find a lot of startups within this space are bootstrapping or taking loans from family and friends to be able to have a simple MVP out and test the markets and look at market viability, product viability. So that space is where we're really looking to support a lot of people, such that when they achieve some form of when they're able to show some form of revenue, so show some form of product market fit, it's then easier for them to get in touch with venture capitals who can then invest bigger tickets in them.
Okay, that's really cool. So I guess it's time to enter a testy subject. So the notion you might find is some of these initiatives are given out on a man no man basis. So people I know someone, and I'm able to get you this fund and all of that. So how do we ensure that this is democratized and people, well-deserving entrepreneurs, farmers, don't miss out on this because they don't know someone in, maybe even in the tech ecosystem, maybe they are not even familiar with the people they should be talking to in the tech ecosystem, and they don't know anyone in government. So how do we help this set of startups? How do we make it democratized for the mass market?
I think if there is any government that has shown that it can do things in a democratic, transparent way, I think it's been this government. And when you look at the way the social investments program was run under His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, within the 4 years, you find that there were beneficiaries who sat in their sitting rooms and applied for government programs and government projects and got on board. And we've sort of applied the same model to how we're going to be doing things. So one, communication is very critical. That's why I'm talking to you. I've also been speaking to Tech Cabal. We're engaging with the traditional media within this space to ensure that we're able to get the message out, to ensure that we're able to let everybody know that these opportunities are coming and you should be able to access it. I've attended a few ecosystem gatherings and spoken to the people, to the persons present also about these programs. So I think communication is going to be very critical in how we ensure that everybody hears about this program and all those who have ideas are able to start to take advantage of this program. The second thing is that the program itself, the overall program, will be governed by the African Development Bank's procurement processes, which emphasizes on transparency, emphasizes on communication, and emphasizes on a plain process that allows everybody equal opportunities to partake in the program. So what you're going to find, for example, with the case of the expressions of interest, which are currently out for the fund managers, is that we've published it in 3 national dailies as is required. But beyond publishing in 3 national dailies, the Bank of Industry published on its LinkedIn profile, on its website. We have the African Development Bank publishing on their website, the French Development Agency publishing on their website. We reached out to TechPoint and other tech media to also publish on their websites, just to ensure that this information goes out to everyone who has the capacity. Because while I may know people within the ecosystem, I don't know everybody within the ecosystem. But what happens is when you allow the media to propagate information, you democratize that information and you allow everyone with access to be able to reach. What we've also done is after the launch, for example, we were on radio, because we also realized that there are certain parts of Nigeria where the easiest way to reach persons is via radio. So we've been on radio, we've been speaking about the program, sensitizing people, and we intend to continue to do that as the program evolves and as the opportunities continue to expand.
All right, that's quite comprehensive. So, but At the end of the day, what would success look like? No, before I even get to that, just to confirm, I'll clarify the equity fund. So startups will be receiving funds in exchange for equity. So who will be the owner of the equity? Will it be iDICE as a body, or will it be one of the partner organizations that will own this equity in the startups?
So, for the fund managers are expected to provide matching funds, right? So, as a fund manager, for every dollar of iDICE that you invest, you're expected to invest a dollar of yours also. So, this is another way in which we're trying to ensure that this has not just become a program where money is being shared. So, if I say to Emmanuel today, I'll give you $10 for investments, but you have to match me with $10. So for every dollar of mine you invest, you have to invest $10, $1 of yours. It means any startup that is coming to Emmanuel has to have comfort and confidence in the ability of that startup to make profit and to be successful in order for Emmanuel to invest his own $1 along with my own $1. So what you're going to find is, because a lot of people say, oh, political interference. So even if someone were to send me a list and say, oh, political list, I'll send the lists to Emmanuel, and Emmanuel will tell you, well, unfortunately, I can't invest in this because I'm not confident of putting my money in it, right? So what was the question? I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Yeah, I was asking who will own the equity in the startup.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. So to the question of equity, what it means then is the fund manager is then able. So the fund manager holds a percentage of equity in trust for the government. So for iDICE and himself, right? So if a fund manager were to take 5% of a company, it means that because half of that money is his, half is for iDICE. So it means he holds that equity in trust. 50% of that equity will be 2.5% in trust for the government. So whenever he's exiting that program, the money comes back to the government. It's the same with the debt options. For those who take debt, you take the debt, when you repay back, it goes back into the government coffers via the Bank of Industry, which is one of the critical reasons why the Bank of Industry was selected as the executing agency for this program, because they have the ability to hold government funds and they have the ability to expend funds and receive funds back.
Oh, that's really cool. So,
and you asked one more question about what will success look like. Success will be trading a minimum of 150,000 people, 175,000 people, and seeing them gain employment. And I'm able to monitor and track and see that these guys have gained employment and a couple of them have set up their own startups. And I think success also will be looking within the policy landscape and being able to have supported domestication of various existing policies and operationalization of existing policies. And very critically, on the access to finance bit, success will be a minimum of 5 unicorns from that come out from the support they received from the iDICE program. I think for me that will be success.
Interesting. So 5 unicorns in how many years?
In 10 years. So the fund is a 10-year fund.
Oh, okay. So 5 unicorns in the next 10 years. I'd love to see that. I really love to see that. Yeah. So how about IPOs, acquisitions, all those major exit events?
Yes, I mean, if we have exits of the likes of Pesta kind of exits, that would be awesome. Also, on IPOs, one organization we've been speaking to is actually the NGX, because one of the things we're discussing with the NGX is trying to see how we can provide some form of support that enables more startups to move into IPOs, enables more startups to be able to list and to be able to raise funding from the public. So that's actually a very critical and important one, and it's one of the areas we're exploring.
Okay. So, I mean, there might be concerns. You try to explain how the equity in trust, but for the government. So, but do you think people would want that? I mean, there's that feeling that, government, there might be. You made reference to it, political interference. You don't think that's going to be an issue at all in this instance?
No, I don't think so. I think the program has been structured in a way that is quite insulated. But beyond that, I also think the government is definitely a continuum. I'm very optimistic that the incoming government is going to be very business friendly. and will be particularly startup friendly. So I have no doubts about that at all. I think when you look at the antecedents of the incoming of the president-elect, vice president-elect, you look at the work done in Borno by the vice president-elect, look at you are in Lagos. Lagos is the startup capital of Africa. So I foresee a situation where instead of having hiccups, we are probably going to get a lot more support for the iDICE program. So I'm quite confident about this. And you had said so while the issue with the equity, so government does not hold equity. The fund managers will hold the equity in trust. So your real engagements, your conversations, your legal agreements are all with the fund manager, not with the government. So startups really do not have any worries about that. And what government is also doing that I forgot to mention is to encourage the private sector to take this on more strongly. The government is taking a 30% first loss on any investments that do not go well. So government is saying to the private sector, for every investment that don't go well, we are going to take on a 30% junior tranche first loss in that investment.
Cool. That's quite interesting. So, have we seen something like this play out in any other part of the world that we can learn from?
Yes, like I mentioned at the beginning, the African Development Bank have done similar projects in Rwanda and in Cote d'Ivoire. So one of the learnings that we got from those two countries was that instead of just setting up a fund, it's better to set up a full program that is holistic and looks at the various indices that affect the ecosystem. But also, when you even look far back in history, you find that a country like Israel, now when you call Israel the startup nation of the world, a country like Israel had done this way back in the 80s. They had done something similar where government had put in funding and had brought in private sector funding to match that and allowed private sector to invest in startups. So the history of Israel being the startup nation of the world today is actually because of a similar program that they had done probably about 40 years ago. So we have quite a rich pool of experience to tap into when you look at activities that have happened in other spaces.
That's quite interesting. So Israel, Rwanda, yeah, that's. I mean that okay. I mean we may have seen initiatives like this from the government in the past. Not I think this is very nicely structured and insulates the startups from government interference as much as possible. But I think in 2020, the Office of the Vice President, during a Presidential Enabling Environment Council meeting, PEBEC, they announced a $20 million technology fund for young innovators, which was approved by the Bank of Industry. Might be one or two of such initiatives in the past. Like, what has been the outcome of this in the past?
So yes, I remember the $20 million fund. That's a Bank of Industry fund. I think is being run by Verod Capital and another fund manager, which I don't remember now. But I think those investments are going very well. I don't have the figures, but I know that what the model that was also deployed was that these were not programs and fundings that were run by the Bank of Industry itself. So what the Bank of Industry did was to get private sector fund managers that it is employed, that's given these funds to, who are then investing in startups. I don't have the figures now. I don't have the details, but I'm aware that those funds are up and running, and I know that investments are ongoing in the ecosystem. But the slight tilt to this also is that this fund, the iDICE, the fund by the iDICE will be riskier in the sense that it's going to take a lot more risk. That's why government is giving a 30% first loss tranche. That's why government is ensuring that 20% of the fund is focused on geographical spread and investment outside your typical investment locations of Lagos, Abuja, Kaduna, Port Harcourt, etc. So I think this is going to be a more democratized opportunity This would be also be an opportunity that will be much more available to a lot more people within the ecosystem. While the Bank of Industry Fund, like the Bank of Industry itself has its own rules and regulations. It has to make profits back to its shareholders. That fund is a lot stricter and a lot more focused on returns.
Okay, that makes sense. You talked about being rich because there's this term in venture capital where most venture capitalists make returns from, let's say they invest in 10 startups, maybe just 2 succeed, and the expectation is that the 2 that succeed in such a manner that it covers for the losses of the 8 that didn't succeed. So yeah, it's the startup game is risky. 95 to 90 to 95% of startups fail, and I was wondering about the appetite for risks from the company that the organizations that are backing iDICE and the government itself. So yeah, how are you thinking about this?
I think also that I expect the success rate to be slightly higher than what is usually obtainable, and that's because this is tackling not just access to finance, it's tackling enterprise support, it's tackling catalytic infrastructure for enterprise organizations, it's tackling talent, and it's tackling the policy environment. So I think you're going to get a lot more, a slightly higher success rate than you typically have. But then, yes, still risky. But I told you, 5 unicorns. It's a $618 million programs. 5 unicorns, that's $5 billion.
Yeah.
If I get 5 unicorns, I'll say the program has been successful.
Cool. So what do you see?
One unicorn makes the program successful.
Yeah.
$618 million, $1 billion. So I'm pretty confident and optimistic about this.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, but what do you see is the future expansion possibilities for iDICE?
Very critical for iDICE is private sector involvement. So what is really important for iDICE is that how are we able to run sustainable programs? How are we able to run this program in a way that by the time we're done on the talent component, we're going to have a lot of talent companies that are now able to run sustainably and build much more talent for Nigeria, both for local consumption and for export. On the access to finance bit, how have we been able to catalyze VC investment in startups as we go ahead? And I'll give an example. And this is not me committing anyone, just an example. So imagine we were to say a state government, right? A state that is not typically startup friendly. And we'd say to the state, will you put in $1 million and we'll match you $1 million to support startups in your state, right? And we're able to do this, and then we're able to get a fund manager who manages this fund and invest in startups in that state. And we're able to catalyze startup activity within that state, such that even when the program ends, what you now have is when Emmanuel now hammers, right? Emmanuel now says, okay, since my governor did this and was able to invest in 100 startups, and the state government is now making money from that, I can also put my money in that, right? So catalyzing investments in such a manner. Or if you're able to say to an industry, for example, say you get someone in the FMCG space and you say, can we put together a fund that looks at supply chain issues to support startups in the supply chain space? Now, this is a company that would typically not think of such, right? We're able to catalyze such thinking, and this company does this. And then we're able to build companies in supply chain. And then you have companies in the brewery sector who now say, oh, we can also do the same. You have a Dangote industry, say, oh, we can also do the same. That's success. I mean, that means that you now changed the thinking. You've now been able to catalyze VC investments in places where they're usually not thought about.
That's cool. That's cool. So I think something I forgot to ask before we round up was, what exactly are you looking for in a fund manager? Because it looks like fund managers will be a very, very critical component of the iDICE program, especially for the fund disbursement part. So what are you looking for, or what are you looking out for in a fund manager?
So we have a lot of fund managers in Nigeria. Private equity, venture capital, we have a lot of fund managers in Nigeria. But very critical for us is fund managers in the tech and creative space. So you must have a proven portfolio of activities in the tech and creative space. Beyond the portfolio, you must have a proven record of engagement with the ecosystem. You must have been a part of this ecosystem. You must understand this ecosystem. You must know this ecosystem, and you must be able to prove that you're someone who is not just a fund manager. It's good to be a fund manager and invest in anything you want to invest in. But we're looking for people who have invested in tech. We're looking for people who have taken the risks in this ecosystem and understand the risks in this ecosystem, understand what it takes to actually win in this ecosystem. And when you really look at that, there are not a lot of them, probably no more than 5. So we already have an idea of the kind of expertise and the kind of skill and the kind of experience that is required for you to be a fund manager on the iDICE program. And that's what we'll be looking at.
All right, that's really cool. So final thoughts you want to share to any startup founder or entrepreneur, or maybe a young upstart that doesn't have anything like me, like, okay, well, what can I do, or anything you can share to any of, and if there's anything that you think I didn't think to ask, please, now that would be a good time to share with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've been very thorough. You've asked quite a lot. But I think if there's any information I'd like to share, I'd like to say the future is now. Grab it. Nigeria and Africa's challenges are not going to go away. We'll have to find solutions to them. And I believe that a lot of those solutions will be hinged on what we can do with our tech and creative skills and what the opportunities within those spaces are. So I would say that if you're thinking of something, stand up and try to do it and apply to the iDICE program. Let's see how we can support you. The second thing I'd like to say is let's work together. Let's make this program a success for those already within the ecosystem. So I'll say to TechPoint, for example, I'll say, let's do this together. This is for the ecosystem. We're not adversaries, right? Let's all come together and let's ensure we make this a success together. So that at the end of the day, the country wins, we all win.
Yeah, that's a really insightful response. And yeah, I also caught a little bit of the sub because in my on the writing, I can be hard on the government. But yeah, I'm really you guys have seen.
It's understandable. Constructive feedback is good.
Yeah. A lot of sense, and I appreciate it's not seen us as the adversary. We don't see the government as the adversary. We just see it as, okay, we all need to grow, we all need to improve, and we all need to help the tech ecosystem. And I think this iDICE program might be one big game changer in the African tech space. And I hope there's continuity.
I'm even on the hot seat because I know if this program is not wrong, well, you're coming for me. So I already have high blood pressure thinking about it.
No. We'll do
just trying to ensure that this has to work, or if not, I'm dead meat.
We'll do it codedly. Thank you so much for joining us, Ife. And
all right.
Audience and listeners, please, if you have any questions, please drop it on the comments. And if there are those I can answer, maybe we'll have to drag Ife back. We'll have to beg him, not drag. We'll have to beg him to come back to come and answer those questions, because open to maybe just addressing these questions for us, then we just share with our audience if there are any more questions that they're having and we need to share.
Not a problem. Always happy to help.
All right. So guys, you're watching this on YouTube. Anyway you're watching this, please like, share, subscribe with your friends, your enemies, your well-wishers, because everybody needs to know about the iDICE. If your enemies and friends are prospering, you're most likely going to prosper, trust me. Then of course, if you are listening to us on any of our podcast platform, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Hyatt Radio, anywhere you get your podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. And drop a on Apple Podcasts. And see you on the next one.